And this is especially concerning given the recent news and the recent leaked emails from Google. They show that labeling mainstream conservative media as Nazis is a premise upon which you operate. It's not even a question, according to those emails. The emails say, given that Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and Dennis Prager are Nazis, given that that's a premise, what do we do about it? 2 of 3 of these people are Jewish, very religious Jews, and yet you think they're Nazis. It begs the question, what kind of education do people at Google have? So they think that religious Jews are Nazis?
Chair, I recognize the gentleman from Texas for 5 minutes, Mr. Crenshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for some of the thoughtful discussion on how you combat terrorism online. I think there's worthy debates to be had there. And there's good questions on whether some of this content provides education so that we know of the bad things out there, or whether it's radicalizing people. Those are hard discussions to have, and I don't know that we're going to solve them today. But the problem is that the testimony doesn't stop there. The policies at your social media companies do not stop there. It doesn't stop at the clear-cut lines of terrorism and terrorist videos and terrorist propaganda. Unfortunately, that's not exactly what we're talking about. It goes much further than that. It goes down the slippery slope of what speech is appropriate for your platform and the vague standards that you employ in order to decide what is appropriate. And this is especially concerning given the recent news and the recent leaked emails from Google. They show that labeling mainstream conservative media as Nazis is a premise upon which you operate. It's not even a question, according to those emails. The emails say, given that Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and Dennis Prager are Nazis, given that that's a premise, what do we do about it? 2 of 3 of these people are Jewish, very religious Jews, and yet you think they're Nazis. It begs the question, what kind of education do people at Google have? So they think that religious Jews are Nazis? 3 of 3 of these people had family members killed in the Holocaust. Ben Shapiro is the #1 target of the alt-right, and yet you people operate off the premise that he's a Nazi. It's pretty disturbing. And it gets to the question, do you believe in hate speech? How do you define that? Can you give me a quick definition right now? Is it written down somewhere, Google? Can you give me a definition of hate speech?
Congressman, yes. So hate speech, again, as updated in our guidelines now, extends to superiority over protected groups to justify discrimination, violence, and so on, based on a number of defining characteristics, whether that's race, sexual orientation, veteran status.
Do you have an example of Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or Dennis Prager engaging in hate speech? Do you have one example off the top of your head?
So, Congressman, we evaluate individual piece of content based on that content, rather than based on the speaker.
Okay. Let's get to the next question. Do you believe speech can be violence? All right, there's not can you incite violence, that is very clearly not protected. But can speech just be violence? Do you believe that speech that isn't specifically calling for violence can be labeled violence and therefore harmful to people? Is that possible?
Congressman, I'm not sure I fully understand the distinction you're drawing. Certainly, again, incitement to violence or things that are encouraging dangerous behavior, those are things that would be against our policies.
Here's the thing. When you call somebody a Nazi, you can make the argument that you're inciting violence, and here's how. As a country, we all agree that Nazis are bad. We actually invaded an entire continent to defeat the Nazis. It's normal to say hashtag punch a Nazi because there's this common thread in this country that they're bad and that they're evil and that they should be destroyed. So when you're operating off of that premise, and frankly, it's a good premise to operate on, well, what you're implying then is that it's okay to use violence against them. When you label them, when one of the most powerful social media companies in the world labels people as Nazis, you can make the argument that's inciting violence. What you're doing is wholly irresponsible. It doesn't stop there. A year ago, it was also made clear that your fact-check system is blatantly targeted at conservative newspapers. Do you have any comment on that? Are you aware of the story I'm talking about?
I'm not familiar with necessarily the specific story, Congressman. I am aware that from all political viewpoints, we sometimes get questions of this sort. I can say that our fact-check labels generally are done algorithmically based on markup and follow our policies. which
For
aren't
the record, they specifically target conservative news media, and oftentimes they have a fact check on there that doesn't even reference the actual article, but Google makes sure that it's right next to it so as to make people understand that that one is questionable, even though when you actually read through it, it has nothing to do with it. A few days ago, and this goes to you, Ms. Burkett, one of my constituents posted photos on Facebook of Republican women daring to say that there are women for Trump. Facebook took down that post right away with no explanation. Is there any explanation for that?
Without seeing it, it's hard for me to opine. That doesn't violate our policies, but I'm happy to follow up on the specific example with you.
Thank you. Listen, here's what it comes down to. If we don't share the values of free speech, I'm not sure where we go from here. This practice of silencing millions and millions of people, it will create wounds and divisions in this country that we cannot heal from. This is extremely worrisome. You've created amazing platforms. We can do amazing things with what these companies have created. But if we continue down this path, it'll tear us apart. You do not have a constitutional obligation to enforce the First Amendment, but I would say that you absolutely have an obligation to enforce American values, and the First Amendment is an underpinning of American values that we should be protecting until the day we die. Thank you, and thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chairman.